national security issues coming up. First of all, we got the CCP flying 37 jets in the Taiwan Strait. That's kind of aggressive, right? Now we've got these hearings going on about our security situation. And the third thing I want to bring to your attention, poll just out today, 55% of Americans name China and the CCP as their number one concern. Higher than inflation, higher than interest rates. The threat of China, 55% of Americans now seeing it for what it is. Reaction to that, Steve Yates.
Well, number one, God bless the American voter and the ordinary people. They see much, much more clearly than a lot of our elected elites and appointed elites. And it's really taken a long time. Some of this is probably settling in as the truth has emerged that we knew from the outset on COVID origins and the impact that really, really bad policy reactions reinforced in our country. The fentanyl pandemic, I think, is a second wave of attack on American family and communities, and the unfair economic practices, and then this bullying and blustering aimed at Taiwan, but really at us and our allies. It's just very, very clear to a lot of people that have eyes to see and ears to hear. They know it. And a lot of our allies, citizens, see it clearly too. So the people of the world know where the destabilizing, intrusive threat is coming from. And it's about time that leaders hear them and act accordingly. We have to change the way we deal with the world, change our trade and manufacturing patterns, and change our national security posture.
So what would be your recommendations here? I mean, Biden's obviously not taking this seriously, and I think that's driving some of the concern that Americans have, Steve.
It is. So I would take it as a given that President Biden isn't going to take my advice or the advice of the American people. I mean, after all, we know what's been going on with his family, and we assume that they're going to have a very different reaction to what the Chinese government is seeking. They've gone for this thaw. But really, it should begin with our economic patterns first. We don't want to go to war as a first option. And so we should be, as Ambassador Lighthizer, former U.S. Trade Representative, has advocated, strategically decoupling, moving our key, most important supply chains out of China, whether it's to other countries, ideally our hemisphere, or our own country. Begins with medical supplies, tech and communications equipment, and go down the line. We just got to begin there. And then we ought to be making much, much more material available for sale, and I emphasize for sale, not giveaway, to those in Asia that can be at the front line of deterrence to keep the malign influences of the CCP pinned down over there. So we saw the Biden White House say that they're going to deny the leader of Hong Kong coming to the APEC summit in the fall. But what basis is there to deny him to come to that gathering while you allow China's communist leader Xi Jinping to come? So I think some moral and strategic clarity, and begin with our economy moving away from China and revving up American greatness from our resources and refining capabilities here. That's our greatest key to the future, I think.
You think Joe Biden is compromised here?
I think he's compromised on a number of fronts. I mean, first is health. Obviously, he's not at the top of his game if he ever was. I mean, there's video from the 70s that might question whether he ever had a close relationship with the truth. That's just got more distant over time. But when it comes to these business ties, I mean, there are many people, including recently a fellow that had ties to Israel was just nailed to the wall for funneling money to a think tank. What's in these documents that have come out more recently tied to Hunter and others is far more concerning in the amount and direct ties to American leadership than that guy ever was by way of a former director of the CIA. So I think there's a cloud there, and you would think that they would behave in a way that would draw strategic attention away from concern on that front, but they're acting in the opposite way at the moment.
Steve, let's get to Hunter Biden and everything that has gone on here. What is your looking at this plea deal imploding, and now everybody's scrambling around trying to figure it out, and of course the state-run media trying to protect him. Now we got indictments coming out again today, which is basically wag the dog. I just want to get your take. You've been around D.C. a long time. What's the deal? What went down in this thing, and what do you think the next steps are with Hunter Biden, based on what you've seen, Steve?
Well, there's, as seems always the case with these kinds of crises or scandals, there's what was done, and then there's what was done about what was done. So the original actions, I mean, this goes beyond shady and questionable behavior. Any of us who've had security clearances have had questions asked of us about our conduct, and anyone who had a tie of kinship or friendship to us engaging in particular conduct that could come back and reflect poorly upon us or our employers, the U.S. government, or that could compromise our ability and loyalties. And when you're talking about drugs and honey traps, and large sums of money, all of those were just tried and true areas where counterintelligence officers from hostile countries would compromise people. So there weren't just red lights going off, there were giant red flares going off on every front with regard to Hunter and the president's brother. What's happening with these documents and the odd legal proceedings, it makes clear that they're being treated differently than anyone else ever has been. And I think that of itself, aside from the behavior, is a scandal that makes just so clear the different tiers of justice that exist for those that are in one protective bubble versus the rest of us. And that, I think, is just very corrosive to the American dream and our ideals, and it undermines America in the eyes of the rest of the world. It's terrible.